On Thanksgiving Day, my daughter stood in the center of our dining room, lifted her champagne glass, and said to New Beginnings. The family clapped, unaware that the new beginnings she meant didn't include me. The table was filled with roasted turkey silverware Emily had polished every year, and laughter that didn't sound like home anymore. Olivia smiled the way her mother used to, except colder, practiced, polished corporate. When the toast ended, she leaned toward me, her diamond earrings catching the light. "Dad," she whispered, "we need to talk after dinner." I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was about the estate paperwork or the charity fund Emily had started before she passed. But when dessert came, the conversation turned. Olivia placed a crisp envelope beside my plate the same way a banker might slide foreclosure papers across a desk. "It's from Mom's estate attorney," she said. "The transfer cleared this morning. The $3.3 million is officially in my name." I looked at her, trying to find a trace of hesitation, a flicker of guilt. There was none. Only the self-assurance of someone who believed money was love, quantified. Thomas, her husband, poured himself more wine and added, "It's what Emily wanted, Richard." She trusted Olivia to manage it. Emily. My wife of 40 years, the woman who still sent me reminders to take my blood pressure pills even when she was hooked to a hospital IV. I could almost hear her voice saying, "Olivia will need guidance, not control." Somehow that message had gotten twisted into ownership. After dinner, the others left plates half-eaten, wandering to the living room for football and small talk. Olivia stood by the fireplace, eyes sharp, voice clipped. "Dad, about the house." I waited. She didn't hesitate. "You've been staying here alone for months now. It's too big for you. Thomas and we're thinking of moving in. You could get a smaller place, maybe by the coast. It'd be peaceful." Peaceful. The word stung worse than anger. "This is my home, Liv," I said quietly. "Your mother and I built it together." She crossed her arms. "It's not healthy for you to live in memories. The estate's done. It's time you moved on." Thomas stepped closer, lowering his voice as though he was speaking to a confused old man. "We can help with the logistics. Movers, deposits, whatever you need." "I don't need help," I replied. "I need honesty." That's when Olivia's mask cracked and her tone turned surgical. "Dad, let's not make this harder. You've had your life. Mom made sure I'm taken care of now. It's time you start letting go." The room fell silent, except for the faint crackle of the fireplace. I stared at the family photos on the mantel. Emily smiling beside a 12-year-old Olivia holding a trophy from her first debate competition. For a moment, I thought about the little girl who once refused to sleep without checking if I'd locked the back door. Then I looked at the woman in front of me, a stranger in my daughter's skin. "So this is it?" I asked. "Yes," she said softly. "You've had enough. Pack your things." There was no shouting, no dramatic exit. Just the dull finality of betrayal wrapped in calm voices. I nodded once, stood up, and walked past her. The last thing I saw was the reflection of the fire in the glass of Emily's photo frame. It looked like her eyes were burning. I packed that night. 2 suitcases, a coat, Emily's old notebook. The house felt smaller with every step I took, walls closing in like judgment. I paused in our bedroom now, technically hers, according to the estate transfer. The scent of lavender still lingered on Emily's side of the bed. I whispered, "You'd tell me to keep my dignity. So I will." Outside, the air was crisp and cold. Leaves scattered like confetti from a celebration I wasn't invited to. I loaded my bags into my old Ford and drove without a destination. Behind me, the house stood, quiet, lights glowing in the windows, the kind of warmth that meant nothing anymore. By midnight, I pulled into a run-down motel off Highway 26. The neon sign buzzed weakly, "Sunrise Inn." The irony didn't escape me. The clerk didn't even look up when I signed R. Hale on the register. The room smelled of bleach and cigarettes. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at my reflection in the mirror, a 62-year-old widower outmaneuvered by his own child. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed a notification from the bank transfer confirmation, 3M 300,000, primary beneficiary, Olivia Hale Green. I exhaled slowly, not in anger, but disbelief. She'd done it. The transaction was clean, final, irreversible, or so she thought. I turned off the phone, lay back on the bed, and stared at the cracked ceiling. Emily's words came back to me, spoken years ago in our kitchen when we'd discussed her will. Promise me one thing, Richard. If things ever go wrong, don't argue. Just keep the control file safe. Control file. I hadn't thought about it in years. A small folder in my desk marked EH, Private Banking. Emily had handled most of the estate details herself. She'd been meticulous, maybe too meticulous. The next morning, I drove to a diner for coffee and eggs that tasted like cardboard. The waitress smiled politely. I nodded back. On the radio, a cheerful voice talked about family unity during the holidays. I almost laughed. When the check came, I noticed the balance on my debit receipt still healthy. My account hadn't been touched. Interesting. Outside, the wind cut through my jacket, sharp and cold. I looked toward the mountains, the gray line of clouds, stacking like decisions, waiting to be made. I thought about calling Olivia, demanding answers, but the thought faded. She wouldn't listen. People who believe they've won never do. Instead, I opened the glove compartment and pulled out Emily's notebook. The leather was cracked corners, worn soft. On the first page, her handwriting neat measured read, "If you ever lose your way, follow the numbers. They tell the truth better than people do." I smiled faintly. Emily never left things to chance. Back at the motel, I found the small flash drive taped under the lining of my suitcase. I'd forgotten I even had it. Written in Emily's handwriting, access file, EH. My pulse quickened. I plugged it into my laptop. A single PDF opened, joint trust authorization. Primary signatory Richard Hale. Not Olivia, not Thomas. Me. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, the corners of my mouth curling into something I hadn't felt in days. Control. Quiet, lawful, undeniable control. Emily had seen this coming. She'd known her daughter's ambition, known how easily it could twist, and she'd left me a single silent weapon authority. Outside, the motel sign flickered. Somewhere across town, Olivia was probably celebrating her new fortune, maybe booking a weekend in Napa, maybe planning renovations. She had no idea her victory was temporary, that every dollar she thought she owned still waited for my authorization. I closed the laptop and leaned back, the chair creaking beneath me. "You always were 2 steps ahead, Emily," I murmured. "And maybe now, so am I." The heater rattled, blowing warm air into the small, stale room. I reached for the notebook again, tracing her handwriting one last time. At the bottom of the page, she'd written a single line. I'd forgotten, justice doesn't scream, Richard. It waits. I smiled, folded the page, and whispered into the stillness, then let it wait a little longer. The night settled around me like armor. Thanksgiving was over. The house, the money, even the betrayal, all of it was noise. What remained was clarity. And somewhere between the hum of the heater and the distant sound of traffic, I decided that when the storm returned, I'd be the one holding the thunder. The motel walls were thin enough that I could hear the couple next door arguing about football. Their voices bled through the wallpaper, sharp and exhausted, the sound of 2 people who had stopped listening a long time ago. I stared at the cracked ceiling fan spinning above me, counting every creak. The air smelled of stale coffee and bleach. It was strange after 40 years of holding everything together. My life now fit into 2 suitcases and a room that rented by the week. Outside, the neon sign buzzed, "Sunrise Inn." It kept flickering between sun and sea, like it couldn't decide if it wanted to rise or disappear. I rubbed my temples and opened Emily's old notebook again. The pages had yellowed slightly, her handwriting still perfectly neat. Every letter looked intentional, like she knew someday I'd need these words to make sense of my chaos, follow the numbers she'd written. The next morning, I walked 2 blocks to a diner called Betty's Place. The kind of spot where coffee was bottomless and the waitresses knew every regular by name. I wasn't one of them. Not yet. The waitress with tired eyes poured me a cup and said, "Rough morning, honey? Rough week," I answered. She smiled kindly. "Thanksgiving'll do that to families." I didn't respond. The bell above the door jingled and a few locals shuffled in. I opened my wallet, saw the debit card with my name, Richard T. Hale, and felt a flicker of something like control. My account balance was untouched. Olivia hadn't even tried to freeze it. Maybe she didn't know it existed. Or maybe she didn't care. I spent the day walking. Portland was gray and quiet, the streets littered with leftover autumn leaves. Couples held coffee cups, children ran through the park in puffy jackets, and I moved among them like a ghost. At a crosswalk, I caught my reflection in a store window wrinkled. Coat eyes, tired but alert. Emily used to say I had a face that made people trust me. I wondered if that was still true. When I got back to the motel, the desk clerk nodded to me. "Roommate, right? Yeah." He slid a key across the counter. "You're paid up for 3 more nights. You want the weekly rate next time it's cheaper." "Thanks," I said. The name on his tag read Jake. He couldn't have been more than 28, maybe 30. Tattoos peeked out from under his sleeves. "Thanksgiving alone?" he asked, tone casual but kind. "Seems so." Jake shrugged. "Families are complicated. Mine still won't talk to me over $500 I borrowed 10 years ago. Guess we all got our versions of betrayal." That word betrayal hit harder than I expected. I gave him a faint smile. Sometimes the ones closest draw the deepest cuts. He nodded slowly, like he knew exactly what I meant. Back in the room, I made a list, not of money or belongings, but of things Olivia had taken without realizing peace trust the sense of being needed. I stared at the last one longest. Emily used to say men like me fell apart, not when we lost power, but when we lost purpose. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories came in flashes, Emily and I building the deck behind our house. Olivia at 7, sitting on my shoulders during fireworks. The hospital room where Emily whispered, "Keep the control file safe." I remembered asking why me and her laughing softly. "Because you don't rush. You think before you act." That's the kind of revenge the world respects. I woke before dawn and brewed motel room coffee that tasted like burnt metal. The heater groaned as it came to life. I pulled my laptop closer, plugged in the USB drive labeled Access File, EH, again, and reread the document I'd found the night before. Joint Trust Authorization. Primary signatory Richard Hale. I scanned the fine print. All disbursements exceeding $10,000 require dual confirmation are Hale and Wellsport Financial. So the accounts weren't hers alone. They were still mine, ours, really. Olivia had possession, not ownership. Emily had designed it that way. My heart beat slower as the realization settled in. This wasn't over. At 7, I took a bus downtown. The city smelled of rain and exhaust. I walked into Wellsport Financial and approached the front desk. The young teller looked up. "Can I help you, sir?" "Yes," I said. "I'd like to confirm authorization status for the Hale Family Trust." Her polite smile faded as she typed. "One moment, Mr. Hale." When she looked up again, her tone had changed, respectful, careful. "It appears you're still listed as primary signatory, sir. Is there a problem?" "Not yet," I said. "But there might be." A voice came from behind me. "Mr. Hale." I turned. A woman in her mid-30s approach badge clipped to her blazer. Sarah Lim, account manager. I worked with your wife for years. She was meticulous. That she was. She led me to a glass office and closed the door. I remember she added a compliance clause to her estate. Ethical oversight, I think she called it. It means any irregular activity triggers a freeze for review. I got the alert yesterday. An alert, I asked, pretending ignorance. Yes. A large transfer over $3 million. The system flagged it, but since you still hold signatory rights, nothing can be finalized without your confirmation. I exhaled, slow and controlled. That's reassuring. Sarah smiled faintly. Emily always said you were the calm one. She trusted you to protect her legacy. I nodded, throat tightening. I'll do my best to honor that. When I left the bank, rain had started to fall. The city looked different now, less gray, more alive. I walked back toward the bus stop, each step steady. Emily hadn't just trusted me. She'd armed me. Back at the motel, Jake was leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone. You look lighter, he said. Good news? Something like that, I replied. He grinned. Man, I hope whoever screwed you over gets what's coming. I raised an eyebrow. You believe in karma? Absolutely. Life always collects its debts, sometimes with interest. I laughed quietly. Then I guess payment's coming due. That evening, I sat at the small table in my room, spread Emily's notebook beside my laptop, and began organizing the files I'd downloaded from the bank's portal. Numbers, signatures, timestamps, everything. Neat, logical, precise. I understood them better than words. Numbers didn't lie, didn't twist truth to suit pride. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I felt the weight on my chest ease. Olivia thought she'd won by taking the house and the money. She didn't realize those things meant nothing without control, and I still had that. Outside, the wind picked up, shaking the window pane. I thought about calling Olivia, about telling her that she'd celebrated too soon. But Emily's handwriting stopped me. Justice doesn't scream. Instead, I wrote in my own notebook, verify accounts done. Contact Harold Kent tomorrow. Keep calm, let her dig her own hole. At midnight, I closed the laptop. The heater hummed softly. I looked at the 2 suitcases by the door, everything I owned now. Yet, strangely, I didn't feel poor. I still had something Olivia never would, patience. Before turning off the light, I took one last look at Emily's handwriting on the inside cover. Control, Richard. It's not about power, it's about fairness. I whispered. Then fairness it is. Outside, rain turned to sleet, tapping against the glass like a slow metronome. The neon sign flickered again, sunrise glowing for a brief, stubborn second before dimming. I smiled. Tomorrow I'd see Harold. Tomorrow the quiet man would start making noise no one could ignore. The rain hadn't stopped since dawn. I stood under the awning outside Kent & Associates, clutching Emily's notebook beneath my coat as if it were a compass. The brass letters on the glass door were faded, but the name still carried weight, Harold Kent, attorney at law. Harold had been our family's lawyer for 30 years, meticulous, discreet, loyal to a fault. If anyone could help me untangle what Emily had left behind, it was him. Inside, the office smelled like old paper and coffee. The secretary looked up from her desk, startled. Mr. Hale. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry about Mrs. Hale. Mr. Kent's been meaning to reach you. He's in. Yes, sir. Go right ahead. Harold Kent was bent over a stack of files when I entered, silver hair, slicked back glasses perched low on his nose. When he looked up, his eyes widened with a mix of shock and relief. Richard Hale, you vanished. I called the house after the funeral, but Olivia said you were traveling. I sat down opposite him. Traveling. That's one word for it. He frowned. What's going on? My daughter told me Emily left everything to her. The house, the accounts, $3.3 million, she said it was all settled. Harold's expression hardened. That's impossible. He opened a drawer, pulling out a thick folder labeled Hail Emily Estate Revision 2023. Your wife's final will was updated last April, signed and notarized. You were one of the witnesses. Do you remember? I do. She insisted we meet at your office for it. Then you should know, Olivia's story doesn't add up. Emily left clear provisions for both of you. He flipped the folder open and began scanning. Here's Section 4, the distribution clause. He turned the document toward me. The familiar curve of Emily's signature was there in blue ink. 60% of liquid assets to Olivia Hale Green, 40% to Richard T. Hale, contingent upon respectful and continued care toward the surviving spouse. I read the next line twice, making sure I wasn't imagining it. In the event that said beneficiary fails to maintain such conduct, all funds shall revert to the surviving spouse in entirety. Emily predicted this, I whispered. She did, Harold said softly. She called it an insurance policy for morality. I stared at the signature again, feeling the weight of every letter. So if Olivia pushed me out, lied about the will, she violated the clause. Exactly. I leaned back, the leather chair creaking. Then, what the hell did she show me? Harold adjusted his glasses. A forgery, most likely. After the funeral, Olivia emailed my office asking for the original notarized copy. She said she wanted to handle the estate logistics personally. My assistant gave her a scanned copy, not the original. A week later, the hard file went missing. Missing Harold nodded grimly, disappeared from storage. I suspected something was wrong, but when I tried calling Olivia, said you were on a grief retreat and not to be disturbed. I felt my pulse throb in my temple. She isolated me on purpose. Richard, she's a lawyer. She knows how to make fraud look legitimate. But her husband's fingerprints are all over this. Thomas's firm handles real estate and private trusts. He would have had access to document templates, notary stamps, the works. Then they didn't just betray me, I said quietly. They betrayed Emily too. Harold closed the file and folded his hands. We'll handle this carefully. You still hold joint control of the trust accounts, correct? Yes. Emily made sure of it. Good. That's your anchor. Don't confront them directly yet. Let them believe you're powerless. Meanwhile, I'll start verifying the authenticity of Emily's signature and contact the notary who witnessed it. If she confirms this is the true will, Olivia and Thomas have committed fraud and elder abuse, both felonies. I nodded slowly, every part of me wanting to rush to Olivia's door and demand an explanation. But Emily's voice echoed again. Justice doesn't scream. Harold poured 2 cups of coffee and handed me one. Your wife was sharp, Richard. She told me once she wasn't afraid of losing money, just of losing fairness. She always believed in fairness. I took a sip, the coffee bitter but grounding, even when it hurt her. He gave me a long look. What are you planning to do? For now, listen. Watch, document everything. He smiled faintly. Good. That's how we win cases in wars. I stared at the rain sliding down the window pane, each drop racing another. It's strange. You spend decades raising a child to think critically, to be strong. You never imagine they'll use those strengths against you. Harold's voice softened. Sometimes the smartest ones forget that integrity is also intelligence. I nodded, unable to speak. The office felt colder now, as if Emily herself was watching from the framed photograph on the bookshelf. When I stood to leave, Harold reached into the folder again and pulled out a smaller envelope. Emily left this with me too. She said I should give it to you only if things went wrong. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a note, handwritten in her careful script. If you're reading this, Richard, it means my fears were justified. Don't let anger guide you. Let truth do the work. The people who underestimate you will teach themselves the lesson I couldn't. I folded the note and slipped it into my jacket pocket. She really did know. Harold smiled sadly. She knew everything about everyone, except how to quit caring. When I stepped outside, the rain had turned to drizzle. I walked down the steps, the city hum, filling the quiet spaces between my thoughts. Emily's words replayed like a steady drumbeat. Truth will do the work. Halfway down the block, I stopped in front of a bookstore window. Inside, a father and daughter were laughing over a stack of puzzle books. She couldn't have been more than 10. He leaned down, pointing to a page, and she giggled, tracing her finger over his wedding ring. The image pierced something deep in me, nostalgia mixed with grief, then hardening into resolve. By the time I reached the corner, I had a plan. That evening, I returned to the motel. Jake was behind the counter munching chips. "Hey, Mr. Hale. You look like a man with a mission. Maybe I am," I said. "Did the lawyer give you any good news? Let's just say the story's not finished yet." Jake grinned. "I'll drink to that." In my room, I spread Harold's photocopies on the desk. The rain tapped the window rhythmically like punctuation marks. At the top of one page, the notary's seal glimmered faintly under the desk lamp. Verified 2023. E. Hale Estate Revision. I traced the embossed circle with my finger and whispered, "Still here, M. Still solid." I opened my notebook and wrote the first entry of what would become my personal record, date November 30th. Subject: fraudulent claim of inheritance by Olivia Hale Green. Evidence authentic, will verified by Harold Kent. Clause breach confirmed. Next step: gather proof of motive and involvement of Thomas Green. Maintain silence until leverage secured. The act of writing steadied me. For decades, I'd solved problems through logic and patience, blueprints, budgets, negotiations. This wasn't so different. It was just the blueprint of justice. Before turning in, I glanced once more at Emily's letter. Her last line glowed in my mind as I switched off the light. Control isn't about power. It's about knowing when to move. I whispered into the dark. Then it's time to move, my love. The neon sign outside flickered again, washing the room in red and white light. Rain continued to fall soft and relentless, like the rhythm of a plan quietly coming to life. The bank statement sat on the table like a verdict. Transfer initiated, $300,000. Beneficiary, Olivia Hale Green. The numbers glared back at me, bold and unapologetic. I stared at them for a long time, the way you look at an old scar, proof that pain once had a purpose. 3.3 million. That was the price of 40 years of marriage, a daughter's loyalty, and one woman's faith in fairness. I ran my thumb over Emily's signature on the last verified document Harold had given me. She'd written her name as if she were pressing permanence into paper, the tail of the Y curling like a quiet promise. Somewhere, Olivia was probably sitting in a leather chair sipping wine, congratulating herself for managing the estate efficiently. She had no idea that the system she thought she owned was still waiting for me to speak. I picked up the phone and called Harold. He answered on the second ring. "Tell me you're sitting down," he said. "I've been sitting down for a week." "What did you find?" "The clause your wife added is watertight. If Olivia has already taken possession of the funds, that violates the moral conduct condition. Once we confirm, we can reclaim everything legally. But you'll need to stay quiet. No confrontation, not yet." How long do we let her think she's won until she hangs herself with confidence? Emily would have liked that. "She planned for it," Harold said, and I could almost hear him smiling. I hung up and stared out the motel window. Rain had stopped. For the first time since Thanksgiving, a shaft of sunlight cut through the clouds, hitting the parking lot and making the puddles look like small mirrors. I caught my reflection in one of them, older, sharper, not beaten, just recalibrated. The next morning, I walked downtown to Wellsport Financial again. Sarah Lim greeted me with that professional, calm banker's reserve for people who might sue them. Mr. Hale, I was just reviewing your trust documents, she said. There's something fascinating here. I'm all ears. She turned her monitor so I could see. Your late wife established a dual control mechanism. Essentially, even though your daughter's the listed beneficiary, every transaction above $10,000 needs your digital approval. Without it, it's pending indefinitely. So I said, pretending to think it over, if she tried to move millions, it would freeze automatically, unless you sign off. I smiled, slow and deliberate. Good. Let's make sure the freeze stays right where it is. Sarah lowered her voice. Mr. Hale, are you planning to take legal action? I'm planning to take my time. When I stepped back into the gray light, I felt something close to satisfaction. Emily had known her daughter's ambition would eclipse her conscience. She'd built a safety valve, a quiet trap disguised as trust. That afternoon, I took a bus across town to the house I no longer lived in. I stopped across the street, engine off, headlights dimmed. Through the wide kitchen windows, I could see Olivia arranging flowers in a vase. Thomas walked in, handed her a folder, and kissed her cheek. They looked like a glossy magazine spread titled, "Success After Grief." The lights inside glowed gold against the evening, warm and false. I stayed only a minute. I didn't need to see more. Revenge wasn't about spectacle. It was about precision. Back at the motel, I opened Emily's notebook and found an envelope tucked between the pages. It was thinner than the others, sealed with a single strip of tape. On the front, in her handwriting, "Open if you lose faith." I hesitated, then peeled it open. Inside was a single page, a letter dated 6 months before she died. If Olivia ever forgets who she is, the law will remember who you are. I've built a trust within the trust. Keep the access file. You'll understand when it matters. E. Underneath a smaller slip of paper contained a bank code I didn't recognize, WPT 2431, dual authorization layer. I searched it online, my hands trembling slightly. It was an additional security level. Emily had added an internal auditing trigger that automatically notified federal regulators if fraudulent activity occurred. She hadn't just prepared for betrayal. She'd weaponized accountability. For a long moment, I sat back, letting the brilliance of her foresight wash over me. Emily had always loved puzzles. This was her final one, and she'd left the solution in plain sight. At 9 that night, I heard a knock. Jake stood in the doorway holding a beer. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. "Not a ghost," I replied. "A blueprint." He handed me the beer. Care to explain that in English? Let's just say my late wife was smarter than everyone in the room, including me. Jake chuckled. "Guess she's still helping you out." "Yeah," I said, "and she just handed me the first move." We sat outside on the plastic chairs, the motel sign humming above us. Jake told me about his brother, how he'd stolen their parents' savings and left town. I listened quietly. Betrayal had different costumes, but always the same eyes. When he finished, I said, "You ever get even?" He shook his head. "Didn't have to. The guy's broke now. Sometimes karma just needs time." "Yeah," I murmured. "Sometimes it needs a signature." After he left, I powered up my laptop and logged into the Wellsport portal. The freeze alert was active. Every cent of Olivia's inheritance sat in limbo, untouchable. At the top of the screen, a yellow banner blinked, awaiting primary signatory confirmation. Richard T. Hale. I clicked Decline. A confirmation window appeared. "Are you sure you wish to decline this transfer?" "Yes." The words "Transaction halted." Under review appeared in bold red letters. I sat back, the chair creaking under me, and whispered, "Checkmate, Emily." The next morning, Sarah Lim called. "Mr. Hale, we've notified the secondary beneficiary of the freeze as standard procedure." "You mean my daughter?" "Yes, sir. I just thought you should know." "She'll be getting a call soon. 3 hours later, Olivia did. I wasn't there to hear it. But I could imagine her confusion, the disbelief, the panic. She'd probably call Thomas, who'd checked the bank portal, frown, and tell her it must be a mistake. Then she'd demand to know why her money wasn't moving, why the man she'd written off as obsolete still had the last word. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and waited. At 4:17 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Olivia. Dad, what did you do? The bank says the accounts are frozen. They mentioned an oversight in authorization. Please call me. I stared at the message for a long moment, then set the phone face down on the table. There was nothing to say. Some lessons needed silence to echo. The sun dipped behind the trees, streaking the sky orange and violet. I opened Emily's notebook one last time that evening and wrote my own note beneath her final entry. You were right. Justice doesn't scream, it calculates. When I looked up, the first stars had appeared. The wind outside carried the faint scent of wet cedar and distant wood smoke. Somewhere, Olivia was realizing her empire rested on a foundation of her mother's handwriting and my patience. I closed the notebook and whispered into the empty room. She thought she inherited everything. She forgot who built it. The motel light flickered once, buzzing softly. The night was still. For the first time in weeks, I felt the calm that comes right before a storm. The kind that doesn't destroy, just corrects. The first rule of revenge is patience. Not the burning kind that eats at you, but the steady kind, the kind that builds walls instead of fires. By the time the sun rose that Monday, I had already written my plan in a small notebook. Collect proof before confrontation. I left the motel early, the air damp with mist. The streetlights flickered out one by one as I walked to the bus stop, carrying nothing but Emily's notebook and my laptop bag. The world was still half asleep, and that suited me fine. I didn't need noise. I needed clarity. At Wellsport Financial, the receptionist recognized me now. Good morning, Mr. Hale, she said with a polite smile. Back again. Routine check, I answered, and she pointed me toward Sarah Lim's office. Sarah greeted me with that mix of curiosity and caution people reserve for someone who's both wronged and dangerous. I reviewed your account logs, she said, gesturing for me to sit. It's unusual. How unusual? There have been multiple login attempts from an external IP address linked to Green & Associates, Thomas's firm. Someone tried to access the internal audit panel. I nodded, unsurprised. They're getting desperate. Sarah leaned in. Mr. Hale, are you aware that your wife added an ethical compliance trigger? If any unauthorized user accesses the trust, the bank is legally obligated to report it to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. So the system will handle the first punch for me, I said. Good to know. She smiled faintly. It seems your late wife was far more strategic than most clients. She left instructions for everything, even a review clause if you were ever displaced from your home. That woman, I murmured, never trusted chance. When I left the bank, I stopped by a cafe near Pioneer Square. I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window, watching people rush by with umbrellas. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to be, someone waiting for them. I had neither, and somehow that was freeing. I opened my laptop, logged into the secure server Harold had created, and uploaded every document Sarah had given me. Every signature, every timestamp, every detail of the forged will Olivia had presented. Harold had been right. Thomas's firm's watermark appeared faintly in the metadata. It was subtle, but not invisible. At noon, I called Harold. I've got digital proof, I said. He exhaled in relief. Then we're halfway there. I'll send it to a forensic specialist to confirm the forgery. Richard, We're building a strong case here. Not a case, I corrected him. A confession. That afternoon, I walked to the post office and mailed a copy of Emily's real will to Harold's private address, not the office, not email, nothing traceable. Then I returned to the motel. Jake was behind the counter, chewing on a toothpick, flipping through his phone. "You look like you've been planning something illegal," he said. "Legal," I corrected him. "Just inconvenient." He laughed. "Those are my favorite kind of plans. I need to send an email, but not from my name." "Can you help?" Jake's eyes lit up. "A decoy, sure. What's the goal to make someone nervous?" I dictated a short message while he typed, "From internal audit at Wellsport Finance. Org to Thomas Green. Subject, confirmation required for offshore account review. Mr. Green, please verify transaction routing for recent transfers exceeding $500,000 from the Hale Trust. Compliance inquiry pending. Respond within 24 hours to avoid escalation." Jake grinned. "You want him to panic?" "I want to see what he deletes," I said. We sent it using a masked domain Jake swore couldn't be traced. Then we waited. By evening, Harold called again. I just got off the phone with our IT consultant. Thomas accessed his firm's email server at 4:08 p.m. He opened the message, then deleted it permanently. We caught the deletion on the server log. "That's obstruction of evidence," I said. Exactly. The FBI loves that. I smiled for the first time that day. "Then let's make sure they get invited to dinner." 2 days later, Sarah called with another update. "Marita, Hale the bank has officially flagged the account. There's been an attempted international transfer from your daughter's sub-account to an offshore holding company." "We're Cayman Islands," she said quietly. "And it's linked to a shell entity under Thomas's firm." I leaned back in the motel chair. "That's not inheritance. That's laundering." "Yes," she replied. "And under federal law, that's not just fraud, it's a felony." I could hear her pause, then she added gently, "Are you sure you want to push this far? They're your family." I thought of Emily, of how she'd once whispered, "If they ever turn against you, let truth do the work." "Yes," I said. "Family or not, this ends now." After hanging up, I went downstairs. Jake was wiping the front counter. "Everything okay? Better than okay." The dominoes just started falling. He handed me a beer from the mini-fridge. "To karma," he said. To math, I corrected him, and we clinked bottles. Later that night, I wrote another note in Emily's notebook. Step 4, gather proof. Step 5, let them destroy themselves. Then I made one last call to Harold. "Contact FinCEN," I said, quietly. "Let them know about the offshore account. But don't use my name. Let the system trigger it naturally. You realize this will bring federal eyes to the case," he warned. That's exactly what Emily wanted. She built this trust to survive greed, not protect it. When I hung up, I looked out at the motel parking lot. A storm was rolling in the kind that makes the whole world hold its breath. Lightning flashed, illuminating the empty highway. Somewhere across town, Olivia was probably sitting at her kitchen table, confused about why the bank had frozen her cards, why Thomas's phone wouldn't stop ringing. She would blame bureaucracy, maybe even me, but not the woman who had really set this trap, her mother. My phone buzzed. A new text. "Olivia, Dad, are you there? Something's wrong with the accounts again. Thomas says there's an audit. Please answer." I set the phone down. No reply. Silence was its own message now. At midnight, Harold sent one final update. Anonymous tip filed. FinCEN notified. They've escalated to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I stared at the message for a while, then wrote a single line in my notebook beneath Emily's handwriting. You were right. Justice doesn't scream at documents. Rain began hammering the motel roof. I closed the notebook, turned off the lamp, and lay in the dark listening to the steady rhythm outside. In the next room, someone's TV played softly, a sitcom laugh track breaking through the storm. I smiled faintly at the absurdity of it all. Betrayal, justice, revenge, it all boiled down to timing. And tonight timing was on my side. When the thunder rolled, I whispered into the darkness, "Let the audit begin." The phone rang just after midnight. I thought it might be Harold with another update, but the caller ID flashed Wellsport Financial. Security Division. I let it buzz twice before answering. "Mr. Hale, this is Karen from Wellsport. I'm calling to confirm a security hold on the Hale Family Trust. We noticed an attempted withdrawal of $1.2 million initiated by your daughter earlier this evening. Our system flagged it for dual authorization." I stared at the wall, the motel's faded wallpaper glowing faintly in the lamplight. "You did the right thing," I said. "Keep it frozen." "Would you like us to inform the beneficiary?" "Yes," I said. "Tell her there's been a small oversight." When I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long moment. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving only the hum of the motel's sign. I poured myself a glass of water, hands steady. The first move had landed. By morning, the storm broke somewhere else at Olivia's house. She must have been in the kitchen when the bank called, because I could picture it vividly, the spotless marble counter, the fresh cup of coffee she'd brewed for Thomas, the half-peeled orange beside her laptop. She'd answer on speakerphone, distracted, confident. "This is Mrs. Green. Mrs. Green, we're calling to confirm a freeze on your trust transfer. The transaction requires primary authorization from Mr. Richard Hale." Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "What do you mean? My father's authorization isn't required." "The funds are mine. I'm afraid that's incorrect, ma'am. Your late mother's trust established dual control. Until Mr. Hale confirms the transfer, the assets remain under joint supervision." I imagined her eyes flicking to Thomas, her lips tightening. "That can't be right," she'd say. My attorney confirmed full ownership. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Green," the voice would reply, calm and professional. "But according to the system, your father remains the primary signatory." When she hung up, Thomas would be pacing, already opening his laptop. "It's probably just a clerical issue," he'd say, his tone too high to sound convincing. "I'll call the firm." And she'd whisper the line I could almost hear from across the city. How could he still have control? At 9:04 a.m. My phone buzzed with a message from Harold. "Bank confirmed, dual authorization still active." They notified Olivia. "Brace for incoming fire." I didn't have to wait long. At 9:15, Olivia called. I let it ring out. Then she texted Dad. "There's a mix-up with the accounts. The bank says you're blocking transfers. Can you call me, please?" I didn't reply. I finished my coffee instead, slow and deliberate. The silence between us was doing all the work I needed. At 9:30, another text came in, this time less polite. "Dad, I'm serious. We can't access anything. Did you mess with the trust?" This isn't funny. Still, I said nothing. By noon, Harold called again. They've called the bank 3 times. Thomas tried to override the security, but the system bounced him. You can almost hear the panic through the emails. "I hope they're taking notes," I said. "Do you want to talk to her?" "Not yet. Let the silence stretch. It teaches better than lectures." Harold chuckled. "You sound more like Emily every day." "Good," I said. She'd have enjoyed this part. That afternoon, I met Harold downtown at a cafe near the courthouse. He had a folder tucked under his arm, and that gleam in his eye reserved for clients who were about to win. "They're crumbling," he said as soon as I sat down. The moment Thomas realized he wasn't in control, he called a compliance meeting with his partners. That's corporate speak for panic. I stirred my coffee slowly. What about Olivia? She emailed me directly. He slid a printout across the table. The message was short, Mr. Kent, my father seems to be confused about the trust's ownership. Please advise him to relinquish his signatory rights to prevent unnecessary complications. Unnecessary complications, I repeated, almost smiling. That's her version of an apology. Harold leaned forward. We'll keep building the case, but you're in control now, Richard. Don't forget that. I won't, I said. As we left, Harold paused. Emily would be proud. I looked at the gray sky above the courthouse steps. She already built the playbook. I'm just following it. That evening, the phone rang again. Olivia's name lit up the screen. This time, I answered. Dad, she began, her voice tight, almost trembling. There's been some kind of error with the bank, I heard. They're saying I can't move the funds without your approval. That's absurd. I'm the beneficiary. You're supposed to be retired, not involved in financial matters anymore. I'm still alive, Olivia, I said quietly. That counts for something. She exhaled sharply. Why are you doing this? I'm trying to manage what Mom left responsibly. By transferring it to offshore accounts? She hesitated. Thomas handles the investments. You don't understand how modern portfolios work. Emily did, I said. And she understood you too. That's why she built safeguards. She trusted you to do the right thing. You chose to do the convenient one. Dad, you're blowing this out of proportion. No, I said softly. You are, and the proportion is $3.3 million. There was silence on the line. I could hear her breathing, shaky now. I didn't mean for things to get complicated, she whispered finally. Yes, you did, I said. You just didn't mean to get caught. She started to speak, but I hung up. Words were wasted now. Actions would speak louder, and they were already screaming. That night the air outside smelled of wet cedar and gasoline. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the laptop screen. The account dashboard blinked, waiting for my command. At the top corner, a message from Wellsport Primary Authorization Renewal required. Click Confirm to maintain control. I hovered the cursor for a moment, then clicked. The message turned green. Control successfully renewed. Valid for 12 months. I whispered to the empty room. Happy Thanksgiving, Olivia. Across town, Olivia sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open to the same account page. The numbers stared back at her, millions, frozen, unmovable. Thomas paced behind her, running a hand through his hair. He's bluffing, Thomas said. He can't keep control forever. There's got to be a way around this. Olivia didn't answer. She clicked the authorization tab again. Each attempt prompted the same message, pending primary signatory approval, R. Hale. She felt her chest tighten. He's not bluffing, she said quietly. Thomas slammed his palm against the table. Then we'll find another route. There's always a loophole. Olivia looked at him, realizing for the first time that every loophole he'd found had only led them deeper into a hole. She rubbed her temples, her voice barely a whisper. I think Mom saw this coming. When Harold called again that night, he was laughing. The bank's customer service department called Olivia back this afternoon. They told her the issue was a tiny administrative oversight. Her words, not mine. A tiny detail, I said. That's what Emily called it too. What's next? Harold asked. Now, I said, closing the laptop and leaning back in the chair. Now, we let the panic do its job. I turned off the light. Outside, the rain started again, soft and rhythmic against the window pane. It wasn't angry anymore. It sounded almost like applause. The call came on a gray Thursday morning. Dad, we need to talk. Olivia said, her voice thin, cautious. face to face. I looked out the motel window. The parking lot shimmered with rain. And somewhere across town, a daughter who thought she'd conquered the world was finally learning what defeat felt like. I didn't answer right away. Where I asked finally. "The house," she said. "Our house. Our house," I repeated softly. "You mean the one you told me to leave?" There was a pause. "Please, Dad." I hesitated for only a second. "I'll be there in an hour." The drive back to Oak Street felt longer than usual. The rain followed me like a shadow light, but constant. As I turned into the driveway, I saw Olivia standing under the porch, her coat pulled tight, a steaming cup of coffee in her hand. She looked smaller somehow, like the house had outgrown her. When I stepped out of the car, she didn't smile. "You came," she said. "I said I would," I replied. "That's still a thing. I do keep promises." Inside, the air smelled of fresh paint and lemon polish. The furniture had been rearranged, all traces of Emily's soft touch erased. Family photos were gone from the walls, replaced by framed abstracts, cold colors, expensive frames. "You've redecorated," I said. "Thomas thought it would help make it ours," she answered. "It already was ours," I said quietly. She sat down on the couch, motioning for me to take the chair opposite. "Dad, this situation, it's gotten out of control." "You mean the bank freezing your funds?" Her eyes narrowed. "You know about that. Word travels," I said. "Especially when it's about a tiny detail. Someone forgot to check." Olivia exhaled sharply. "You're enjoying this?" "No," I said. "I'm remembering it." She looked away, jaw tightening. "Thomas says you're being unreasonable. The money was supposed to go to me. You don't even need it." I leaned forward slightly. "You think this is about money, isn't it always?" For a long moment the room was silent, except for the rain tapping against the windows. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a folded document, Emily's real will. I laid it gently on the coffee table between us. "Read it," I said. She hesitated, then opened it. Her eyes scanned the page, and I watched the color drain from her face. "This can't be real," she whispered. "It's notarized. Signed by your mother. Filed by Harold Kent himself." Her voice cracked. "She left me 60%. And a condition," I interrupted. "You were to care for me, treat me with respect. You failed that clause the moment you told me to leave this house." She looked up, eyes glassy. "She set me up to fail." "No," I said evenly. "She gave you a test, and you flunked it." Olivia stood pacing. "Thomas said this could happen, that you'd twist everything to control me." "Thomas," I repeated. "The man who helped forge a will and tried to move $3 million overseas? Tell me, Olivia, when did your husband become your lawyer?" Her face froze. "You have no proof." I smiled faintly. "That's the thing about proof. It doesn't need your permission to exist." She stopped pacing. "Dad, listen. I know things look bad, but we can fix this. If we handle it quietly, I can transfer a portion back to you, say $500,000, and we call it even." I stared at her, unblinking. "You're offering me my own money as a peace offering?" Her voice rose. "I'm trying to make peace, no," I said softly. "You're trying to buy forgiveness." She sank back onto the couch, her composure cracking. "You don't understand what it's like," she whispered. "Mom always looked at me like I was never enough. And then she left you everything that mattered, her trust, her voice. I just wanted something that was mine." I watched her wipe her tears with the back of her hand, smudging her makeup. For a moment, I saw the little girl who used to tug my sleeve when she was scared of thunderstorms. Then I remembered the woman who told me to find somewhere else to die. Olivia, I said quietly, your mother gave you everything, education, safety, opportunity. All she asked was respect. You traded it for control, and now you have neither. She looked up, her expression hardening. You think this makes you some kind of hero? No, I said. It just means I learned from the best. She built her justice in silence. I'm doing the same. Her eyes darted toward the door as if she expected Thomas to walk in and save her. You'll regret this, she said. We'll challenge the will. We'll make you look senile, unfit to manage finances. I stood slowly, buttoning my coat. Be careful, Olivia. Threats sound a lot like confessions when lawyers are listening. What does that mean? It means this conversation was recorded. Her mouth fell open. You wouldn't? Your mother would have, I said. And I'm just finishing her work. I turned toward the door. Behind me, Olivia's voice cracked like glass. Dad, please don't do this. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. You already did. When I stepped outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. The house looked the same as it always had, but something in me had changed. The anger was gone, replaced by something cleaner, resolve. As I walked down the driveway, Harold called. How'd it go? She tried to negotiate. He chuckled. Predictable. She's scared. That's good. Are you ready for the next step? Yes, I said. Call Rachel Torres at the FBI. Tell her the financial crimes lead we discussed is confirmed. It's time. You sure you want to go federal? I'm done playing house, I replied. The line was quiet for a moment. Understood. I ended the call and got into my car. The windshield wipers squeaked back and forth as I sat there, letting the sound fill the silence. On the passenger seat lay Emily's notebook, still open to the page that read, Justice doesn't scream. I traced the words with my finger and whispered, but sometimes it knocks on the door wearing a badge. Before driving off, I looked once more at the house, the same porch where Emily used to hang flower baskets, where Olivia had once played with sidewalk chalk. A single light glowed in the upstairs window. For a heartbeat, I wondered if she was crying. Then I remembered the forged papers, the offshore account, the lies spoken with my name in her mouth. Regret was a luxury she no longer afforded me. I started the engine. The road ahead glistened wet and endless under the streetlights. I rolled down the window, letting the damp air hit my face. Somewhere behind me, a chapter was closing. Ahead, a reckoning waited. By the time I reached the main road, my phone buzzed again. Harold's text. Torres says she's ready. Operation Justice begins tomorrow. I smiled into the darkness. Good, I murmured. Let's see how they handle the truth. The rain picked up again, soft and steady, like the world applauding the quiet man who'd finally learned how to make thunder. The folder hit the desk with a soft thud. This, Harold said, sliding the stack toward me, is everything we need to make the walls close in. The office smelled of rain-soaked coats and burnt coffee. Through the window, the Portland skyline was half hidden by fog, the kind of gray that matched my mood perfectly. I opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, wire records, and a copy of Emily's will, with Harold's handwritten notes in the margins. At least 5 forged documents, he continued. Thomas's firm handled them under a dummy name, J.K. FinServe, Cayman Islands branch. He got sloppy. I skimmed the first page. They always do when they think they're winning. Harold leaned back. I spoke to a contact in the Financial Crimes Division. Special Agent Rachel Torres. She's handled inheritance fraud before, sharp as hell, quiet as a cat. If we give her this, she'll move fast. I nodded. Set it up. She'll want to meet you in person. Good, I said. I've got stories to tell. Agent Torres arrived the next morning. She was in her 40s, dark hair pulled back, expression unreadable. Her suit was immaculate, but her eyes missed nothing. Mr. Hale, she said, shaking my hand. I've reviewed the initial file Mr. Kent sent. I just have one question. Are you ready for this to get messy? I smiled faintly. It's been messy for months. I'm just finally cleaning it up. We sat in Harold's conference room. Rachel opened her laptop and a map filled the screen lines connecting Oregon to New York, the Cayman Islands, and Zurich. Here's the trail, she said. Thomas Green's firm created a shell company, J.K. FinServe. The funds from your family trust were redirected there 2 weeks after your wife's funeral. He then tried to reroute a portion $1.2 million through Zurich to a numbered account under his initials. That's where FinCEN flagged it. And Olivia, she authorized it, Torres said flatly. That makes her an accomplice. The word hung in the air like a stone. She clicked to the next slide. We can charge them with wire fraud, inheritance fraud, and money laundering. But before we move, we need a controlled verification. Something that ties Olivia and Thomas directly to the forged documents. Harold looked at me. That's where you come in. Torres nodded. We'll need you to contact your daughter, keep communication open. If she acknowledges the fake will or any of the transfers, we can record it as evidence. I took a deep breath. You want me to bait her? Torres's expression didn't change. You're the only one she'll answer. And you're the only one she trusts enough to slip up around. Trust, I repeated. That's ironic. That evening I called Olivia. My thumb hovered over her number for a full minute before I pressed dial. She answered on the second ring. Dad, I've been thinking, I said slowly. About the trust, about the bank. She hesitated. Are you willing to work something out, maybe? I said, Thomas mentioned some technicalities with the will. I just want to make sure we're following the right version. The right version, the one you showed me. There was silence on the line. I could almost hear her breathing quicken. Dad, I don't think we should talk about legal documents over the phone. That's funny, I said lightly. You didn't mind before. Things are complicated now. I'm aware. Before she could hang up, I added, Tell Thomas I'd like to meet. Face to face. Let's fix this like a family. She exhaled shakily. Fine, tomorrow, noon, at the house. I ended the call and looked up. Agent Torres, seated across the table with her earpiece still in, gave a small nod. Perfect, she said. We'll have surveillance in place. Operation Justice is officially active. The next day felt like stepping into a play where everyone already knew their lines. The FBI team arrived early, 2 unmarked sedans parked half a block away, agents disguised as utility workers setting up cameras along the street. Torres and Harold briefed me one last time. Stay calm, she said. Don't accuse. Let her talk. The moment she references the forged will or the offshore transfers, we've got her? I nodded. And if Thomas gets aggressive? Her expression didn't change. Then you let me handle him. By noon, I was sitting in my old living room again. The house felt smaller, colder. Olivia entered first, wearing a gray coat and the expression of someone trying not to panic. Thomas followed, briefcase in hand, jaw tight. Dad, she began. We didn't expect this to blow up like it has. I noticed, I said. Banks freezing accounts, lawyers whispering. Quite the holiday season. Thomas set his briefcase down. Let's skip the guilt trip, Richard. We can resolve this quickly. If you sign over your authorization rights, the funds will unfreeze within 24 hours. Sign them over, I repeated, just like that. It's for the best, Olivia said. You don't need the stress. I looked between them, then leaned back. Your mother used to say stress builds character. But then you two seem to have built plenty already. Thomas scowled. You're being sarcastic and it's not helping anyone. Neither is forgery. His eyes snapped up. Excuse me. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded paper, one of the forged wills they'd submitted. This is the document you used to convince the bank that Olivia inherited everything. Recognize the signature. Thomas's composure faltered for half a second before he forced a laugh. That's ridiculous. You must have printed something off the internet. Maybe I said. Or maybe your firm's watermark on the metadata says otherwise. Olivia looked at him sharply. Thomas, he didn't answer. I stood slowly. You forged her name, moved money overseas, and you thought no one would notice. The problem with building lies on paper is that paper leaves a trail. Thomas's face went pale. You don't know what you're talking about. I smiled faintly. Then you won't mind repeating that to the nice woman standing outside. The front door opened. Agent Torres stepped in, badge in hand, followed by 2 agents in dark jackets. Olivia gasped. Thomas froze his mouth half open. Thomas Green and Olivia Hale Green Torres, said her voice calm but commanding. You're under investigation for inheritance fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent. Olivia turned to me, tears already forming. Dad, please, this isn't what it looks like. No, I said quietly. It's exactly what it looks like. Torres nodded to her team. They took the briefcase and escorted Thomas toward the door. Olivia tried to reach for me, but one of the agents stopped her gently. Dad, she whispered, please, you can stop this. You can tell them it was a misunderstanding. I shook my head. You misunderstood who you were dealing with. When the agents left, Torres turned to me. We'll take it from here. You've done enough. I exhaled, feeling something inside me unclench after months of holding tight. Does it ever feel good? I asked. Justice Torres paused. Not good, but right. That evening, Harold and I sat in his office with 2 cups of coffee in silence between us. Finally, he said, It's over. No, I replied, it's beginning. He raised an eyebrow. You mean the legal proceedings? I mean the truth. It's about to come out, and the world will finally see what Emily saw long before any of us did. Outside, the city lights blurred through the rain. I imagined Emily's voice in the quiet, steady, patient, proud. Justice doesn't scream, I whispered to myself, but tonight it spoke loud enough. And somewhere between the thunder rolling over Portland and the flashing lights outside Thomas's firm, I felt the quiet satisfaction of a man who'd waited long enough for the storm to break and made sure it fell exactly where it was supposed to. The news broke before sunrise. Prominent attorney and wife arrested in multi-million-dollar inheritance fraud. The headline ran across every local broadcast. The TV in my motel room flickered between camera footage of flashing lights outside my old house and close-ups of Olivia shielding her face as she was led into an unmarked car. I sat at the edge of the bed, coffee cooling in my hands. It didn't feel like victory, just quiet. A kind of silence that follows a storm once it's spent all its rage. By mid-morning, the phone rang. It's done, Harold said. The FBI has both of them in custody. Torres called Thomas cracked first. She's bringing you in this afternoon. I stared at the rain sliding down the window. Cracked, he admitted to forging Emily's signature. Claimed it was to protect family interests. You were right, he used the offshore accounts to hide the trail. Torres wants you to verify a few statements. All right, I said. I'll be there. When I arrived at the federal building, the lobby buzzed with reporters. Cameras flashed as soon as I stepped through the revolving doors. Someone shouted, Mr. Hale, did you know about your daughter's involvement? I didn't stop walking. There were no answers they deserved yet. Inside, Agent Torres waited with that calm professionalism she wore like armor. Mr. Hale, she said, extending her hand, I think you'll want to sit down for this. In the interrogation room, a stack of files sat between us. She flipped one open. We obtained a full confession from Thomas Green last night. But there's something else, something your wife did before she passed. I frowned. Emily Torres nodded. She was working with us. For a moment, I couldn't speak. She contacted our office almost a year ago. Torres continued. Your wife suspected her daughter and son-in-law were manipulating her into rewriting her estate. She didn't want to accuse them without proof, so she provided us copies of all her financial documents, digital authorizations, and personal statements. She even requested surveillance on her accounts for irregular movement. I stared at the papers she handed me. Emily's handwriting, steady, unmistakable, filled the margins. Notes like, "If this goes wrong, contact Richard first, and he'll know what to do." She knew I whispered. Torres nodded. She did. And she trusted you to finish it. I sat back the breath, leaving me all at once. All the months of confusion of wondering why Emily had been so cautious before she died. Now it made sense. She'd seen the betrayal coming and built a map for me to follow. "Agent Torres," I said finally, "you said?" Thomas confessed. "What about Olivia?" Her expression softened. "She's denying intent, claiming ignorance of the forgeries. But the evidence emails authorizations, her digital approval? It's solid. She'll face charges." I rubbed a hand over my face. "She's my daughter." "She's also a co-conspirator," Torres said gently. "I'm sorry." Later, she led me to an observation room. Through the one-way glass, I saw Olivia sitting alone at a table. Her hair was pulled back messily, eyes red-rimmed. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the air vent. "She asked to see you," Torres said. I took a deep breath. Let her wait a little longer. For 15 minutes, I watched her fidget, wringing her hands, whispering to herself, glancing at the door every few seconds. She looked small, brittle. But pity was a dangerous thing. It dulled judgment. Finally, I nodded. "All right." When I entered, she stood up quickly. "Dad." I didn't answer, just sat across from her. I didn't know she blurted out. Thomas said everything was legitimate. He handled the paperwork. I just signed where he told me to. "Is that your defense?" I asked quietly. "Obedience?" She shook her head, tears spilling. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I thought Mom wanted it that way. She said she trusted me. She trusted you," I said, "to take care of me, not take from me. Dad, please, I can fix this." "No," I said. "You can't." Her shoulders slumped. "They said Mom left something for you, a letter." I pulled the envelope from my coat pocket and placed it on the table. I already read it. What did it say? I looked at her, the child who used to run barefoot across the lawn, who used to hug me goodnight. It said to let truth do the work. That's what I'm doing. She started crying in earnest, then choking out apologies between gasps. "I was scared. Thomas said if we didn't move the money, the taxes would eat it all. I just wanted security. You still had everything Mom's love, her faith. I had to have something. Greed dressed as fear," I said quietly. "It's an old costume." Her voice cracked. "Dad, please tell them it was his idea. Please, I already told them the truth," I said. "That's all I owe anyone now." She dropped her face into her hands, sobbing. I stood slowly. "You'll have time to think," I said. "Make it count." I turned to leave. Behind me, she whispered, "He hated me." I paused at the door. "No," I said without turning around. "Your mother loved you enough to hope you'd prove her wrong. You didn't." Outside, the afternoon light looked washed out, pale and cold. Torres joined me on the steps. "You handled that well," she said. "It doesn't feel like handling. It feels like burying." "Justice often does," she replied. "For what it's worth, Thomas's plea will make sentencing lighter. Olivia might get probation instead of prison." I nodded slowly. Then maybe there's still a piece of mercy left in all this. Torres studied me for a moment. You know, most people come through this angry. You're calm. I had a good teacher, I said. Emily always believed anger was just grief in disguise. Torres smiled faintly. She sounds like she was extraordinary. She was, I said, watching the rain begin again. And she still is. That night I went home, not to the motel, but to the house on Oak Street. The agents had finished their sweep, and for the first time in months, it was mine again. I walked through the hallway, touching the walls, the familiar wood grain beneath my fingers. The silence felt clean now. In the bedroom, I found Emily's photograph still on the dresser. The frame was dusty, but the smile inside hadn't faded. I wiped the glass with my sleeve. You were 3 steps ahead, I whispered, even from the grave. The next morning, Harold called. Torres just sent the final report. The accounts are restored to you. Every penny. I let out a slow breath. What about the trust clause? It reverts entirely to you. Olivia forfeited her share when she violated the terms. It's all yours now, Richard House assets, everything. For a long time I said nothing. Then softly, she built it for justice, not comfort. Harold's voice was warm. Maybe now you can use it for both. After we hung up, I stood at the window watching the light spread across the wet lawn. For the first time, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt alive. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat at the table, and opened Emily's notebook again. On the final page in faded ink she'd written, "If this ever reaches you, it means I was right to trust your patience. Let the storm end where it began, with truth." I closed the book gently. It's over, I said aloud. But even as I spoke, I knew it wasn't entirely over. The law had done its part. The rest, healing, rebuilding, was mine alone to finish. Outside, thunder rolled far in the distance. For once, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like applause. The headline hit the newsstands before I'd even finished my morning coffee. Family betrayal, daughter and husband, convicted in $3.3 million estate fraud. Below it was a photo of Olivia and Thomas leaving the courthouse, wrists cuffed, faces hidden behind sunglasses that couldn't hide the shame. The phone buzzed non-stop. Reporters, journalists, old neighbors suddenly remembering my name. I ignored them all. I turned the TV off, closed the blinds, and let silence sit beside me at the table where Emily and I had once shared breakfast. When the phone rang again, I nearly didn't answer. But the name on the screen made me pause. Harold Kent. They pled guilty, he said without preamble. Thomas is taking the heavier sentence, 18 months federal, plus financial restitution. Olivia's getting 12 months with probation afterward. I didn't say anything. Richard Harold said more gently, "It's over. The press will feast on this for a week, but the law's done its part." Over, I repeated. That's a funny word. I'm not sure it fits. I know, he said. But you've got what Emily wanted, justice, not vengeance. Don't lose sight of that. I hung up and walked to the window. Outside, the trees along Oak Street had turned gold, their leaves falling in slow, deliberate spirals. Emily had always loved this time of year. October makes everything honest, she used to say. It strips what's fake and leaves what's true. Now, standing in the house we built together, I understood exactly what she meant. By noon, the story had spread far beyond Portland. The Oregon Chronicle, the Post, even an online true crime channel picked it up. Every headline had the same flavor: a father's revenge, the calm man who outsmarted his family, justice in silence. Jake called from the motel. "Mr. Hale, you're trending online," he said, half laughing. "People are calling you the quiet storm." "Let's hope it blows over soon," I replied. He chuckled. "You kidding? There's a Reddit thread about you with 50,000 upvotes. Folks are calling your story the ultimate real-life revenge. I sighed. That word again. It's not bad press, Jake said. People need stories like this, proof that fairness still means something. After I hung up, I sat for a while thinking about that. Fairness, justice, revenge. Somewhere along the way, the three had blurred into one another. But I didn't feel proud or powerful. I just felt done. 2 days later, a news van parked outside. I was about to close the blinds when a woman stepped out holding a microphone. I recognized her face instantly. Janet Cooper, Channel 7 News. She smiled when I opened the door. Mr. Hale, thank you for agreeing to speak with us. I didn't agree, I said. She laughed softly. Fair enough. But I think you'll want to hear why I'm here. We're doing a special feature on elder financial abuse. Your story, your calm response, your refusal to retaliate violently, it's inspired a lot of people. Violence never fixes rot, I said quietly. She nodded, stepping inside. Her cameraman followed, setting up by the fireplace. Would you mind sitting here? She asked. I settled into the armchair. The light from the window caught the edge of Emily's photo on the mantel. Janet noticed it. Your wife, yes. She's part of why people connect with your story. You didn't just fight back, you honored her principles while doing it. I looked at the camera, unsure whether to smile. Emily was the one who planned most of this, I said. She saw further than any of us did. Janet leaned forward. And what do you feel now that it's all out there? Peace, I said simply. Not joy, not triumph, just balance. She hesitated, then asked, would you call this revenge? I shook my head. No. Revenge takes something from you. Justice gives it back. The camera light flicked off. Janet smiled. That line might outlive the rest of us. After she left, I stood by the window watching the van pull away. Across the street, a woman was walking her dog. She waved politely. I waved back. For the first time in months, it felt like the neighborhood was mine again. That evening, I turned on the TV out of habit. Janet's interview had already aired. Her voice filled the living room. In a world where betrayal often ends in bitterness, one man chose patience and truth. Richard Hale, 62, taught Oregon what moral justice looks like. The footage cut to me saying, justice gives back what revenge takes away. Then the segment ended with a montage of courthouse photos and the words, a real-life story of family betrayal and redemption. The next day, I woke to dozens of emails. Strangers wrote from as far as Florida and Maine, men and women in their 60s, thanking me for standing up to greed or proving that patience still wins. One message stood out, Mr. Hale, I'm 70 years old. My son emptied my savings last year. I didn't think anyone would believe me. After seeing your story, I went to my lawyer today. Thank you for reminding me that I'm not powerless. I read it 3 times, then set my coffee down and whispered, that's Emily's victory, not mine. At noon, Harold called again. I just got off the phone with Torres, he said. Your cooperation helped them link Thomas's firm to 2 other fraud cases. They're calling it a breakthrough. Good, I said. Let the right people get the credit. You're a humble man, Richard. No, I said. I just know when enough is enough. He laughed softly. If the world had more of you, I'd be out of business. Maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing, I replied. That night, I took a walk through the neighborhood. The air was crisp, filled with wood smoke and the faint scent of rain. A few houses still had their porch lights up from Thanksgiving. At the corner cafe, an elderly woman called out, Mr. Hale. I turned. She was holding a newspaper folded under her arm. Your story gave me courage, she said. You made us proud. I smiled, unsure what to say. Thank you, I managed. She patted my arm. You didn't destroy your family. You just showed them what truth costs. There's a difference. As I walked home, her words echoed in my head. What truth costs? It had cost me silence, distance, a daughter. But it had also bought peace, dignity, and the memory of a woman who planned justice as carefully as she had planted her roses. Back home, I poured myself a glass of wine, the same bottle Thomas had sent us the Christmas before Emily died. I held it up to the light. To you, Em, I said quietly. We did it your way. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft and steady against the windows. The city's noise faded beneath it, and for the first time in a year, I felt the world exhale with me. Justice hadn't shouted. It had whispered. And the whisper was enough. The morning light spilled across the kitchen counter, soft and golden, the kind of light Emily used to say made everything look forgiving. 6 months had passed since the trial. The house smelled of coffee and cedar oil again, not of fear or lawyers or paper. For the first time in years, silence didn't feel like absence. It felt earned. I sat at the breakfast table sorting through documents for the new foundation. Across the header, the letters gleamed in clean dark ink, the Emily Hale Foundation for Elder Protection. The name still made my throat tighten. It wasn't about money. It was about meaning. Emily had always believed fairness should outlive her, and now it would. A knock at the door broke my thoughts. When I opened it, Harold stood there holding 2 cups of coffee and a folder. His tie was crooked, his smile tired but real. You've turned into a morning person, he said. I sleep better these days, I replied, motioning him in. He glanced around the living room. Looks different. It is different, I said. Everything unnecessary's gone. Keeps the ghosts quiet. He set the coffee on the table. I wanted to deliver this personally. He handed me the folder. Final transfer paperwork. The house and all assets are officially under your name, clean and uncontested. The foundation's fully registered too. I ran a finger over the embossed seal. Emily would have liked the precision. She'd have liked what you're doing with it even more, he said. We sat for a while, sipping coffee in the easy quiet of people who no longer needed to fill space with words. So Harold said finally, "What's next?" "Outreach," I answered. "Workshops, legal help lines. We've already got 5 volunteers. Rachel Torres even offered to train our legal team on recognizing elder financial abuse." He nodded, smiling. "You're building something real, Richard. That's better than revenge." "It's restitution," I said, "for others who didn't have an Emily to plan ahead." He studied me for a moment. "You look lighter." "I am," I said. Justice settled the dust. Now it's just life again. Later that afternoon, I walked through what used to be Emily's study, now the foundation's small office. Sunlight poured through the newly cleaned windows, falling over stacks of binders, correspondence, donation receipts. On the wall hung a framed quote I'd written in marker the day we opened: "Justice doesn't scream. It teaches." Next to it was a photograph of Emily taken the year before she died. She was standing in our garden, wind tangling her hair, one hand on her hip, that familiar half smile that meant she was about to win another argument. I spoke softly to the photo. "We're doing good work, Em. You built the first half. I'm just keeping the engine running." The door creaked. Jake poked his head in, holding a clipboard. "Got a minute, boss?" He still called me boss, even though I kept telling him not to. The kid had gone from motel clerk to communications director in under 6 months. His tattoos still peeked out from under his sleeves, but now he wore them with pride. "Go ahead," I said. "We hit 10,000 followers on the foundation page," he said, grinning. "People are donating from all over. Your story's still spreading, man. They call it the quiet man's justice." "Catchy," I said dryly. He laughed. "There's more. Channel 7 wants to do a follow-up interview, and Netflix's docu-team reached out again about that limited series idea. I raised an eyebrow. A movie about my mistakes. He shrugged. About your patients. They think it could help raise awareness. You'd get creative control. I thought about it. Emily had hated public attention, but she'd have loved the purpose behind it. Tell them we'll talk. But only if the proceeds go straight into the foundation. Jake grinned. Already guessed you'd say that. As he turned to leave, I said, Jake. He looked back. You've done good work. You remind me of myself 30 years ago. Stubborn, restless, but honest. Thanks, Mr. Hale, he said. His voice softer now. And thanks for taking a chance on me. Emily would have said the same thing she told me, I said. Don't waste second chances. They're rarer than diamonds. That evening, after the office closed, I found myself sitting on the porch with a cup of tea watching the last light fade behind the trees. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, familiar again. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a man defined by what he'd lost, but by what he'd rebuilt. Inside the phone buzzed a notification from the Foundation's email. A new message from an address I knew by heart but hadn't seen in months, oliviag@mail.com. My chest tightened. I opened it slowly. Dad, I know I don't deserve an answer. I've been trying to understand everything that happened. Mom's video, your silence, the choices I made. I lost everything because I thought money would prove I mattered. Now I realize you and Mom spent your whole lives trying to teach me that love is what matters. I can't ask forgiveness, but I hope you're okay. I hope the Foundation helps someone the way Mom helped me once, before I forgot how to listen. Olivia. I sat back in the chair staring at the screen. For the first time since the betrayal, the knot in my chest loosened, not entirely, but enough to let air through. I didn't reply. Some apologies didn't need an audience. I printed the email, folded it neatly, and slipped it into Emily's notebook between her final pages. The next morning, Rachel Torres visited the office. She wore civilian clothes now, jeans, a blazer, her badge tucked away. I had to see this place, she said, glancing around the office. Your story's changing federal training programs. They're using your case as a model for prevention. Emily's case, I corrected. She smiled. Of course. We sat with coffee by the window. You ever regret how it played out? She asked. Every day, I said honestly. But not for the reasons you'd think. She waited. I regret that it took betrayal to make me see what Emily saw all along, that control isn't power, it's responsibility. I regret losing my daughter to greed before she understood what she inherited wasn't money but decency. Rachel nodded. Maybe she'll find it again someday. Maybe, I said. But I won't wait for it. My work's here now. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. For you, she said. Inside was a copy of the FBI's commendation letter, signed by the regional director, for outstanding cooperation and integrity during Operation Justice. I looked at her, startled. I didn't do anything special. You reminded us what integrity looks like, she said. That's rarer than evidence these days. When she left, I set the letter beside Emily's picture. You hear that? I whispered. We made it into the paperwork. That night, the Foundation held its first community dinner. Dozens of older couples, widows, and small business owners came to share their stories. Some cried, some laughed. I spoke last, standing at the small podium we'd borrowed from the church down the road. I was once told that justice doesn't scream. I said, my voice echoing softly across the hall. Now I know why. Because it doesn't have to. It lives quietly in the choices we make after the noise ends. There was a stillness then a collective breath like the world pausing to listen. Afterward, as people filtered out, Jake clapped me on the shoulder. "You did good, boss," he said. I smiled. We did good. Later, when the hall emptied, I walked outside. The air was cool and sweet. The city lights glowed faintly in the distance, and for the first time I didn't feel the weight of the past pressing on me. I felt Emily beside me, quiet, approving eternal. The legacy wasn't money or property. It was endurance, built one choice at a time. I closed my eyes and said to the night, "We turned pain into purpose, Em. That's the inheritance no one can steal." The sunrise that morning felt different, gentler, almost like the world had decided to forgive itself. Light spilled through the kitchen window, landing across the polished oak table where Emily used to sit with her tea and crossword puzzles. I poured myself a cup of coffee and opened the window. Outside, the birds had returned to the garden she planted 20 years ago. The roses were beginning to bloom again. I had an interview scheduled for 9, not with a journalist this time, but with a small production crew working on a documentary called True Justice, Real Lives, Real Lessons. I wasn't sure why I'd agreed to it. Maybe because it was time to stop hiding behind silence and start using it for something larger. When they arrived, the director, a young woman named Claire, walked through the house with quiet reverence. "This place feels alive," she said softly. "It should," I replied. "It survived everything else." They set up cameras in the living room. Emily's portrait hung above the mantel just where she'd left it. Claire looked at it and said, "Would you mind if it stays in the frame during the interview?" "I'd prefer it," I said. "She's the real reason anyone's listening." The lights flicked on. Claire adjusted her headset. "Whenever you're ready, Mr. Hale." I leaned back in the chair, hands folded. "Ready?" She began gently. "Mr. Hale, people all over the country know your story now. Betrayal, justice, redemption. What do you want them to take from it?" I thought about it for a long moment. "That justice isn't something you chase with anger," I said slowly. "It's something you build with patience. Revenge burns fast. Justice lasts." Claire smiled. "That's a beautiful distinction. And your daughter, have you spoken to her since her release?" I shook my head. "No. She wrote me once. I didn't respond. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. They're meant to stand as reminders." "What kind of reminders?" That love without integrity turns into greed. That silence isn't weakness, it's a weapon if you know how to use it. The cameraman lowered his lens for a moment, maybe because even he needed a breath. Claire said quietly, "A lot of viewers say your story gave them courage. How does that feel?" "It feels like balance," I answered. When Emily died, I thought balance died with her. But truth has its own gravity. Eventually, everything falls where it belongs. When they wrapped the shoot, Claire asked if I wanted to record a personal message to the audience, a closing thought. The room went still again. I stared into the camera lens and saw my reflection. Older now, steadier, maybe even at peace. "If you're watching this," I began, "you've probably been hurt by someone you trusted. Maybe it was family. Maybe a friend. I know what that feels like. But listen, revenge doesn't heal you. It just keeps you standing in the fire, waiting for someone else to burn. The best revenge is rebuilding yourself so completely that their betrayal stops defining you." I paused. "Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what justice means to you. Maybe your voice will help someone else find theirs." Claire's eyes softened. "That was perfect," she whispered. After they left, the house felt quiet again, but not empty. I walked to the study and opened Emily's notebook for the last time. Her handwriting had faded slightly with age, but the last line still shone clear under the lamplight. "Justice doesn't scream, Richard. It whispers." Listen closely, and you'll hear it in peace. I ran my fingers across the page, then closed the book gently. It no longer felt like an instruction. It felt like a farewell. Later, I took a walk through the backyard. The grass was damp underfoot, and the air smelled faintly of pine. The old oak tree at the corner of the yard was shedding its last winter bark, and beneath it, I saw something half buried in the dirt, an old brass tag Emily had tied to the trunk when she first planted it. It read, "For what grows after we're gone." I brushed off the dirt, smiling. Still leaving me messages, huh? That afternoon, Rachel Torres stopped by. She looked less like an agent now, hair down, no badge, a soft sweater instead of a blazer. "Thought I'd check on you," she said, stepping into the living room. "I'm fine," I said. "Better than fine." "I watched your interview preview," she said. "It's spreading fast. People are calling you the voice of quiet justice." I laughed softly. Emily would have hated that. Maybe, Rachel said. But she'd be proud of what you've done with her legacy. She looked around the house at the photo of Emily, the foundation brochures stacked neatly on the table, the framed letter of commendation from the FBI. "You built something lasting, Richard?" "That's rare." "Not lasting," I said. "Alive. There's a difference." Rachel smiled. "So what's next for you?" I looked toward the art studio where Emily's desk had been replaced by an easel. A half-finished painting rested there, a self-portrait of a man standing at dawn, face turned toward the light. "I think I'll finish that," I said. "And maybe teach a few workshops for the foundation. Pass on what I learned before time catches up." Rachel nodded. "You've earned your peace." As she left, she turned back at the door. "For what it's worth, Mr. Hell, you didn't just get justice. You taught it." Evening came quietly. I poured myself a glass of wine, just one, and took it out to the porch. The city lights shimmered in the distance, blurred by mist. I sat down, the wood creaking softly under my weight, and let the sounds of life fill the space around me. Somewhere a neighbor laughed. A dog barked. A car passed headlights glancing off the windows. I raised the glass toward the garden. "To you, Em," I said. We turned the storm into shelter. The night air was cool, but not cold. I closed my eyes and listened to the faint hum of cicadas and the whispering wind. It sounded like her voice again, calm and certain justice waits. Peace follows. When I opened my eyes, the stars were out, bright, stubborn, unashamed of shining after the rain. I went back inside, turned off the lights, and let the quiet settle. The foundation files sat neatly stacked on my desk, a life's work completed. On the wall above them hung Emily's photograph, still smiling, still watching. And in that stillness, I realized something. I didn't need revenge or even forgiveness. I had something far greater: continuity. If you've listened to this far, thank you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what peace looks like to you. Because maybe your story, like mine, will remind someone that truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just endures. The camera fades to black. And in the darkness, a voice, my voice, whispers the last words Emily ever wrote to me. Justice doesn't end. It simply becomes the next quiet beginning.